Morgan Freeman saves a kidnapped boy, but the real twist left everyone speechless. The bustling marketplace was alive with noise, vendors shouting, customers bargaining, footsteps echoing against the pavement. Amidst the chaos, a small boy sat hunched in the shadows, eyes wide with silent terror. No one noticed him. No one cared, except for Morgan Freeman. And when he stopped, everything changed. Is kindness true power? Comment 1 for yes, 0 for no. Morgan Freeman had seen many things in his lifetime, but there was something about the boy's expression that stopped him in his tracks. He was small, couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. His clothes were slightly oversized, his dark curls unkempt, his face pale. But it was his eyes that struck Morgan the most, wide, darting, filled with an unspoken plea for help. Next to him, a man stood impatiently, gripping the child's wrist just a little too tightly. The grip wasn't one of affection, it was control. Morgan observed the interaction carefully. The man, mid-40s, unshaven, shifting uneasily, spoke in a hurried, dismissive tone. "Come on, let's go, stop dawdling." The boy flinched at the words, but didn't speak. He didn't resist. He simply looked down. A chilling realization settled in Morgan's chest. The boy wasn't misbehaving. He was afraid. Morgan took a step closer, offering a warm but deliberate smile. "Hey there, young man. Everything okay?" The boy didn't answer. His fingers twitched slightly, then ever so subtly, he moved his hand in a rhythmic motion. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. A signal. A silent SOS. Morgan's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a nervous child. This was a child in danger, and if he didn't act now, it could be too late. But when he spoke again, the man's entire demeanor changed. His smile dropped, his grip tightened, and the air around them turned suffocatingly tense. Morgan Freeman had always believed that the smallest details often held the greatest truths. And in that moment, staring at the boy's trembling hands as he tapped out a silent SOS, he knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a desperate plea for rescue. The man beside the child, his supposed guardian, noticed Morgan's lingering presence and shifted uncomfortably. His grip on the boy's wrist tightened, fingers pressing into the delicate skin. "We're in a hurry," he muttered, forcing a smile. "Come on, kid." But the boy didn't move. Morgan, ever composed, tilted his head slightly. "What's the rush?" His voice was calm, smooth, almost casual, but there was an unmistakable weight behind his words. The man let out a forced chuckle, though his eyes remained sharp and watchful. "Kids these days, you know, always distracted." He ruffled the boy's hair stiffly, but the motion was unnatural, mechanical. Morgan's gaze flickered to the boy's face. The child's expression didn't change. No comfort, no familiarity, no trust, just fear. And that was enough. Morgan stepped forward, closing the gap between them. His towering presence, his quiet authority, was impossible to ignore. "Funny thing," he said lightly, eyes locked on the man. "I don't recall him saying a word this whole time." The man stiffened. Morgan crouched slightly, bringing himself to the child's eye level. His voice softened. "Hey there, son. Do you know this man?" The boy's lips parted, but the words didn't come. His fingers twitched again. Tap, tap, tap. Pause, tap, tap, tap. Another SOS. Morgan's stomach churned. Before he could say another word, the man yanked the boy's arm roughly. "Enough, we're leaving." His tone was clipped, firm, borderline panicked. Morgan straightened, his voice turning sharper, cutting through the air like a blade. "I don't think so." The man froze. Silence stretched between them, thick with tension. People moved around them, the market bustling with life, but in this small pocket of space, the world had shrunk to just 3 people. The man licked his lips, glancing around as if weighing his options. "Look, I don't know what you think is going on here, but this is my nephew," he said, his voice now edged with irritation. "We're heading home." Morgan didn't move. His deep brown eyes never wavered. "Your nephew," he repeated slowly, deliberately. The man's jaw tightened. Yeah, we're family. Morgan exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. You see, there's a problem with that. He gestured subtly toward the boy. He hasn't said a word, and I don't think it's because he's shy. The boy's breathing was shallow now, his small chest rising and falling too quickly. Morgan noticed the way his feet remained planted, the slight tremor in his fingers as he clenched the hem of his too large hoodie. He was terrified. And then, just for a second, Morgan saw it. The shift. The man's act slipped. His polite smile faltered, his grip on the boy's wrist twitching. The frustration was creeping in. Morgan recognized it instantly. He'd seen it before. It was the look of a man caught. And suddenly, Morgan knew. This wasn't his nephew. This wasn't his child. This man was a liar. Morgan's fingers curled into fists. He had to keep him here long enough, just long enough. For the first time, a sharpness entered his tone. Why don't we settle this properly? We can call his parents, make sure everything checks out. The man let out a dry laugh. This is ridiculous. We don't need to do that. Morgan took a step closer, his presence almost suffocating now. Then you won't mind if I ask the boy one more time. His voice lowered, gentle but firm. Son, do you want to go with him? For the first time, the boy's fingers unclenched from his hoodie. His lips quivered. And then, he shook his head. Morgan's pulse pounded. The man's entire demeanor snapped. His grip on the boy tightened painfully and his voice dropped into a harsh whisper. Enough of this. We're leaving. Now. Morgan's muscles coiled, his mind calculating his next move. He couldn't let this man take another step. Not with that child. Not when he knew. And then, the man did something Morgan hadn't expected. He let go of the boy's wrist, only to reach inside his coat. In that moment, Morgan realized this wasn't just a kidnapping. This man was more dangerous than anyone in the crowd could have imagined. Morgan's instincts flared like an alarm. The man's hand had disappeared into his coat. It was a move Morgan had seen too many times before, a desperate attempt at control. A last resort. Morgan didn't blink, didn't flinch. He had spent years reading people, knowing exactly when fear turned into aggression. But he wasn't afraid. Instead, he slowly raised his hands in a show of calm. Easy now, he said, his voice level, his presence unshaken. No need for this to get worse. The man's fingers curled around something in his jacket. His face twitched. Hesitation. Morgan seized on it. You know who I am, he said plainly. You know my face, and I guarantee you don't want this to go where you're thinking. The man's breath hitched. His eyes darted around the crowd. People still moved past them, oblivious, but a few had started to notice the tension. A woman frowned from a nearby stall. A shopkeeper looked up from his cash register. The air was shifting. Morgan took half a step forward, positioning himself subtly between the man and the boy. His voice dropped lower, softer, dangerously calm. Let me tell you what's about to happen, he murmured. The man stiffened. You're going to take your hand out of your jacket slowly, Morgan continued. You're not going to do anything stupid, because you know how that ends. You're going to step back, and you're going to let this boy go. The man's nostrils flared. His muscles were coiled so tightly that Morgan could see the veins in his neck bulging. But then, he hesitated again. He was weighing the risk. Morgan pressed in, his voice a whisper now. Because if you don't, the next 5 minutes will be the worst mistake of your life. The man's breathing was ragged. His fingers flexed inside his coat, and then a single miscalculation. The man jerked his hand free. Morgan reacted instantly. A blur of movement. The object the man had pulled out clattered to the ground. Not a weapon, a set of car keys. The tension snapped like a wire. The man had been bluffing. Morgan exhaled slowly, letting the silence settle. The man took an unsteady step backward, his bravado cracking. I just wanted to get out of here, he muttered. This isn't what you think. Morgan's stare was unrelenting. You know exactly what this is. The crowd was paying attention now. A few people had stopped, whispering, eyes flickering between Morgan and the man. And then finally, the moment broke. The man turned on his heel and ran. For a single second, Morgan considered going after him, but then a small tug on his sleeve. Morgan looked down. The boy was standing beside him now, clutching his coat, his tiny fingers trembling. Morgan crouched, his voice softer than ever. "You're safe." The boy swallowed hard, blinking rapidly as if still processing what had just happened. Then his lips parted, and he spoke for the first time. "Thank you." Morgan's chest tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "We're going to get you back where you belong, all right?" The boy nodded, wiping his nose with his sleeve. His small shoulders sagged, not in defeat, but in relief. Morgan tapped his phone screen, calling the authorities. As he waited, he glanced back in the direction the man had run. The coward had disappeared into the maze of streets. But he wouldn't get far. Morgan had memorized his face, and he wasn't done yet. What Morgan didn't know was that this wasn't just a single kidnapping. It was something far worse, and the real danger was still out there. Morgan kept a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, feeling the child's small frame still trembling beneath his touch. The weight of what had just happened hadn't fully settled. Not for the boy and not for him. The authorities were already on their way. But something didn't sit right. The man had run. Cowards always ran. But men like him, they didn't act alone. Morgan scanned the marketplace, his sharp eyes sweeping the area. Everything had returned to normal. Vendors calling out their prices, customers sifting through fruit and fabric, the smell of roasting meat wafting through the air. But something felt off. The boy shifted beside him, his hands still gripping the fabric of Morgan's coat like a lifeline. His voice was barely above a whisper. "There's another one." Morgan's breath stilled. He turned slightly, keeping his expression neutral. "Another what, son?" The boy's eyes darted around anxiously. He wasn't just nervous, he was scanning, looking for someone. Morgan crouched, making sure the boy could see his face clearly. His voice was low, reassuring. "You can tell me." The boy's lips trembled. The man who ran, he wasn't alone. His tiny hands clutched at his sleeves. "There's a woman. She's watching." Watching! Morgan's pulse quickened. He didn't turn his head immediately. Instead, he moved slowly, carefully, keeping his stance casual. But his senses were razor sharp. And then he saw her. A woman stood near the entrance of the market, leaning against a pillar, feigning disinterest. But Morgan had spent years reading people, and he knew exactly what he was looking at. She wasn't shopping. She wasn't wandering. She was tracking the boy. And now she was looking directly at Morgan. A slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. Morgan knew that look. It was the look of someone who wasn't afraid. She wasn't running, because she thought she still had control. Morgan straightened, pressing a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. "Stay right here," he murmured. "You're safe with me." The boy nodded, wide-eyed. Morgan took a step forward. The woman didn't move. The crowd bustled between them, the space shifting, but their locked gaze never broke. Morgan had met predators before. He knew how they operated, and right now, this woman was making a choice. Would she fight for this boy, or would she walk away? Then, just as he was about to close the gap, she did something unexpected. She tilted her head almost playfully. Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached into her purse and lifted a phone to her ear. Morgan felt it before he heard it. The sound of an approaching motorcycle. His instinct screamed. He turned just in time to see a man on a sleek black bike racing straight for them. His body low, his gloved hands gripping the handles with ruthless precision. Morgan's mind calculated in an instant. They weren't trying to grab the boy back. They were trying to silence him. The motorcycle roared forward, too fast for anyone in the crowd to react. But Morgan wasn't just anyone. In a flash, he moved. His body coiled, his muscles tensed, then he lunged. He grabbed the boy and spun, shielding him with his own body as the motorcycle skidded to a brutal halt, inches away. The crowd screamed, people scattering in every direction. The rider cursed, swerving at the last second. Too late. He'd lost the element of surprise. Morgan pivoted sharply, his eyes locking onto the woman again, but she was already gone, vanished into the chaos. Morgan clenched his jaw. She had been a distraction, a lure, and he had walked right into it. The boy trembled against him, gripping his sleeve. Morgan exhaled sharply, scanning the streets. His mind was already forming a new plan. This wasn't just a kidnapping attempt, this was something bigger. And someone out there wanted this child silenced. Morgan's heart pounded like a war drum, but his exterior remained composed. Years of experience had trained him for moments like this, when the world was spiraling into chaos, but he had to remain the calm at the center of the storm. The boy was shaking against him, his tiny fingers clenching onto Morgan's coat as if letting go meant losing himself completely. Morgan crouched slightly, his voice steady. "You're okay, I've got you." The boy didn't answer. He just nodded against Morgan's chest, his breathing uneven. The market had exploded into noise. People were shouting, vendors scrambling to gather their fallen goods, the scent of spices and street food now mixed with the sharp tang of burning rubber left behind by the skidding motorcycle. But Morgan wasn't listening to any of it. His mind was already piecing together the puzzle. This wasn't just a random kidnapping, this was an operation. The first man, the one who had tried to walk away with the boy, had been nothing more than a pawn. The woman? A handler, someone who was there to watch, to make sure things went smoothly. And the biker? The enforcer? The one sent in when things went wrong? Morgan's jaw tightened. They had a system, a chain of command, and if that was the case, then someone higher up was calling the shots. His instincts screamed at him. They weren't done yet. He lifted his eyes, scanning the exits. The woman had disappeared, but she hadn't gone far. She was watching, waiting, and that meant they weren't giving up on the boy. Morgan pulled out his phone, stepping backward toward a more concealed spot. He had already called the authorities earlier, but now he needed to do more. His fingers flew over the screen. Location. Bizarre. Hostile actors. Child in danger. Need extraction. A direct message to someone he knew would understand. Someone who would move. He hit send. Then he turned back to the boy. "Listen to me carefully," he murmured, his voice low but firm. "We're going to get out of here, but I need you to do exactly as I say." The boy swallowed hard. Are they going to come after me again?" Morgan didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes." The boy's face crumpled, but he didn't cry. He just nodded, his small hands balling into fists. Good, he had fight in him. Morgan straightened, adjusting his stance. "We need to move." But before he could take a step, his phone buzzed, an incoming message. "Unknown number." "You should have walked away." Morgan's grip on the phone tightened. His muscles coiled like a spring. Then, a movement. From the corner of his eye, he saw her. The woman was back, and this time, she wasn't alone. Two men had joined her, both dressed casually, blending into the crowd. But their movements, too coordinated, too sharp. Morgan's pulse pounded. They were closing in. He exhaled slowly, his mind calculating the fastest way out. If they got surrounded, things would escalate fast. Then, without hesitation, he moved. Gripping the boy's hand, he cut through the side of the market, dodging between wooden stalls and weaving through clusters of people. The moment they were out of sight from the main square, Morgan broke into a sprint. The boy gasped but didn't resist. He ran with him, his small legs struggling to keep up, but Morgan would not let go. Footsteps pounded behind them. Shouts. They were following, hunting. Morgan turned a sharp corner, ducking behind a stack of shipping crates in an alley. His hand went to his pocket, pulling out a small, compact item. A phone? Number A beacon. He pressed the side and a small blue light flickered. Signal sent. Backup coming. The boy clutched his chest, panting hard. What do we do?" Morgan's eyes flicked toward the entrance of the alley. The footsteps were getting closer. He looked back down at the boy, his expression deadly serious. "We fight smart," the boy blinked. "But there's two of them." Morgan gave a slight smile, his voice calm. "There's one of me." The boy stared at him, then despite everything, despite the fear still lingering in his eyes, he smiled back. Morgan placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Stay behind me." Then he turned to face the threat head on. But as Morgan prepared for the fight, a car screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance. And what stepped out wasn't what he expected. The black car screeched to a halt at the alley's entrance. Morgan braced himself, shielding the boy behind him, prepared for the worst. But when the door swung open, it wasn't another enforcer. It was the man from before, the one who had first tried to take the boy. His face was pale, his breaths uneven. He wasn't running anymore. Morgan didn't lower his guard. "You came back," he said flatly. The man swallowed, his eyes flickering between Morgan and the boy. His voice cracked. "I didn't sign up for this." The boy tensed, gripping Morgan's coat. Morgan's voice remained firm. "You knew what you were doing?" The man's expression twisted. Guilt, regret, fear. "I thought it was just business. I didn't know." He looked at the boy, his hands shaking. "I didn't know they'd go this far." Morgan studied him. "And yet, you let it happen." Silence. Then the man let out a long, shuddering breath. He reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out a small flash drive. "They won't stop," he admitted, voice hoarse. "But this has everything. Names, places. It's how you end it." Morgan didn't move. "Why give it to me?" The man met his gaze, and for the first time, Morgan saw something human in his eyes. "Because I can't live with it," the man whispered, "and neither can they." Morgan took the flash drive. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. The man took one last glance at the boy, then disappeared into the night. Morgan knelt beside the child, pressing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's over," he murmured. The boy hesitated, then leaned into Morgan's side, and for the first time, he let himself believe it. Through this story, we realize that dignity, respect, and kindness are choices we make every day. True worth isn't measured by power or wealth, but by the way we treat those who are vulnerable. Sometimes it takes just one person paying attention to save a life. But redemption isn't just about making up for the past. It's about choosing to change the future. Because the real difference between good and evil isn't circumstance, it's the moment we decide who we want to be.